that 13th pick if they can get him, but and that sets them up to get rid of Troy Drayton as well. So there'll be some dealing after these picks, I'm pretty sure of that, but they'll be ecstatic. Steve Wortmeyer, who's the director of football operations here, said yesterday that if he's there, we're going to take him. And you talk about money, they're taking him number 6. They didn't trade up to number 2. Maybe there'll be a little savings there. Back to you, Chris.
Maybe Georgia won't have to work the phones tomorrow. They'll fly her home, Hank. It's St. Louis, then New England, then Carolina, then Houston. Those are the next picks on the board. Nobody knows Lawrence Phillips better than his college coach, Tom Osborne, at the University of Nebraska. Recently, we spoke with Osborne about his star running back.
He has sincerely examined his problem. I can't tell you that nothing will ever happen. The medical people that diagnosed him said it was primarily a situational thing. It was not something that they would predict necessarily would happen again and again. But he lost somebody in his life that was very important to him. He'd had some other losses earlier in his life that had been pretty devastating to him, and so he reacted very strongly. But it was not necessarily something that was going to be an ongoing pattern. So, and he absolutely had no evidence of psychosis or any type of mental dysfunction. So, I mean, he can behave very normally, and so I think that he will do well. But no one can predict human behavior absolutely, and so if something would happen a year from now, I'm just giving him the best information that I have right now.
Certainly, the eyes have been upon Lawrence Phillips this winter and this early spring. But our college game day eyes have always been upon Lawrence Phillips and Chris Fowler, Mike Gottfried, etc. Guys, your thoughts on Phillips finding a home here with St. Louis?
All right, Chris. Well, Mike, we talked about the off-the-field, the quote-unquote character issue with Phillips. Let's talk about him.
For Nebraska in his career, he's the best player in the draft. Just watch him here in his quickness and his cutting ability. In the ball game against Florida, gets the football, and watch his head. His head is on a swivel. He's got a feel in the hole for the defenders. And then he's got the breakaway speed. He's just got a feel that's a running back. It's a natural feel that Lawrence Phillips has. He's going to run a stretch play to the left side. Now look at him protect the football, cut through, protects the ball, the home run ability that he has into the secondary. Every time he has the football, Chris, he has a chance to take it the distance. Question about his running back, his hands, but he makes catches on option plays all the time. Here you see a little swing pass that he takes for a big gain down the field. He has good hands. I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. But he only had 4 receptions in 1999. He's only had 12 in the last 2 years as a running back. But when you caught as many option plays, the underhand pitch, I don't think he...
With the 6th pick in the first round obtained from the Redskins, the St. Louis Rams select Lawrence Phillips, running back, Nebraska. The New England Patriots are next on the clock.
Now, so Georgia Frontieri and the Rams played poker. They stood pat. They knew when to hold him. They decided not to fold him, didn't have to make a move. And they're paying him number 6 money as opposed to number 2 or number 3 money. And that's the guy they wanted all along. So I would got to think that the St. Louis Rams extraordinarily happy. It's worked out. You still wouldn't do this, Mel, if you were the Rams.
No way, Chris. It's too deep a year for running backs. You can get a Eddie George, a Tim Biakabatuka. They could have gone Marvin Harrison here, then running back at 13. To me, you know, there's too many running backs. Any year you need one, you can get one. On the plus side for St. Louis, they do have Zach Wiegert and Toby Wright in St. Louis that can maybe keep tabs on Lawrence Phillips, 2 former Cornhuskers that know Lawrence Phillips.
Congratulations,
so hopefully that'll help. I would not have signed Steve Walsh as a quarterback, so you can argue that why draft Marvin Harrison? He has too much speed. Walsh couldn't find him on deep routes. But I myself, Joe, would not have taken Steve Walsh and brought him into the fold at quarterback either.
Well, I don't agree with either of your points, to be honest with you, Mel. I think Lawrence Phillips is a good pick here. I think, as we've said, and most people have conceded, take the problems off the field away. Everybody's called him the best player in the draft. You have to sooner or later let the talent go. This is not a league of angels. There are people that have had problems, but they've gotten over them. I think this is a young man who will put this behind him and be a better football player. When you look at the quarterback need for the Rams, Steve Walsh or Randall Cunningham had to be the obvious choice because there really weren't many people out there. I think what Rich Brooks is looking for, the quarterback position is a position today where you don't lose football games, not necessarily win them. I think Steve Walsh fits in there perfectly. I think they're going to count on their defense to make plays. They're going to count on their offense to control the game. That guarantees you almost 9 wins today,
Joe.
Bill.
This is not the only running back in this draft.
No, but he's considered the best.
Well, he's considered. Are you evaluating him in totality?
Yes.
Okay.
I am. I am. I've evaluated him in totality.
If he would have had a major reconstructive knee surgery, we would have factored that in.
But that's physical.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at
the physical
everything,
aspect
Joe.
of it. I mean, the mental aspect, I believe, is behind him. Everybody else, I think, is trying to say, don't do this because of his character.
Joe, that's a fact.
It is a fact, but it's also something that I think will be behind him.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we can argue this,
You and
all
I, City, we can do that.
We could do that all
about
night.
10 hours.
My attitude is that in 3 years we'll look back and see what's happening, but I really believe with these running backs, let's look and see where Timmy Biakabatuka is, where an Eddie George is. Eddie George, I think, is going to be a steal for somebody. Forget this Heisman Trophy rap.
Listen,
I think he's going to be another Marcus Allen in the
I
NFL.
don't disagree with you. The simple fact that these 3 young men, Biakabatuka, Eddie George, and Phillips, all are quality backs. They're all going to be successes. I think Phillips was the right pick here.
Well, you know what's good? Let's see. It took to the 6th pick now. Joe Mel, 2 minutes for roughing. I'm writing it down right now. And late in the first period, you both go off. We'll skate at equal strength. We reiterate that Lawrence Phillips will have a press conference in St. Louis. He's in L.A. now, so we don't know whether that will be a late this afternoon, this evening press conference, or whether it will be tomorrow. But whenever it is, we'll have it live for you here on ESPN. And then he will speak with our Hank Goldberg, who, of course, is on site. And very soon we'll find out if that's a today situation or a tomorrow situation. Just getting to the running back for one moment, sometimes you can never tell. For example, in '87, there were 6 running backs selected in the first round. Alonzo Highsmith, Brent Fullwood, DJ Dozier, Paul Palmer, Roger Vick, Terrence Flagler. 6 first-round picks, running back.
Where are they now?
Where are they now? But other times you have men like Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, Marshall Faulk. You do roll the dice in this thing, don't you? We're going to separate Mel and Joe, and we'll be back with New England in a moment.
All of a sudden, we're looking at Phillips and Tim Biakabatuka on the board that Jimmy Johnson got out of his seat, walked over to where Brian Wiedmer, our vice president, is on the phone there talking to a team. Gary Stevens, offensive coordinator, behind him. And then you see here, no deal, if he was talking deal, to get up there to maybe take a Biakabatuka. The problem is New England in the division in the AFC East can't make a deal with them. And I really think the Patriots want a wide receiver like Terry Glenn to match up with Drew Bledsoe because, let's face it, Bledsoe needs some weapons. Let's go to Tom Jackson in Carolina.
Well, Mort, I think you're exactly right there. Bill Parcells had an interest in Cedric Jones, who's no longer on the board because he was the one defensive lineman who would play 3 downs as soon as he came into this league. I think the other being Darrell Gardner. I don't think there's a real interest by Coach Parcells in Gardner because of some questions as far as attitude. So I think the position to look at is wide receiver, and I think there's a couple on the board that are very, very even in terms of talent. One is Terry Glenn and the other being Marvin Harrison, and I know that Coach Parcells will really lean toward the guy who's going to offer him the most in terms of special teams, and I think in that area, certainly the edge goes to Marvin Harrison. Let's go to Chris Fowler.
All right, Tom, the guy the media up in New England call Punxsutawney Bill because he comes out once a year. We'll have to come out in about 7 minutes, Mike Lombardi, and talk about the Patriots pick or a trade. What's going on in the war room right now, do you think?
Well, I think if they're going to go wide receiver, I think potentially they would pick it, they could move down a little bit to New Orleans slot and then pick a receiver at that point. If they don't pick a receiver and they want to pick a defensive player, then they've got to make a decision here. But I think they could possibly trade down to get a receiver if that's what they want to do.
New Orleans drafting at number 11. Why would they do that? Because there's so many good receivers in the draft and because the defensive guys they coveted aren't there?
Well, I think New Orleans could come up and get a running back. We know New Orleans wants to try to get a legitimate running back to help their running game out. So I think if New Orleans moves up, it would be to pick Tim Biakabatuka here.
Okay, so Punxsutawney Bill on the clock, but maybe talking trade. Let's go back down to Chris Myers in Dallas.
All right, thanks, Chris. Yeah, we wouldn't call it a struggle, but it's not exactly a Boston Tea Party. There still is some discussion going on in the New England Patriot war room. Bill Parcells would still like to go defensive lineman. He just feels more comfortable about that, even though Cedric Jones was the top guy on his board. Although Bobby Greer in the front office and owner Bob Kraft are leaning and pushing towards the big play wide receiver. Terry Glenn is the guy they like out of Ohio State, although Parcells thinks he's a little bit smallish. We'll see which way they decide to go. One of their people remarked that Terry Glenn is no Joey Galloway. So let's see what they do. Let's now go to New York. The pick is on the way.
All right, Chris, thank you very much. The pick is up at the podium. New England Who's going to help Drew Bledsoe? Here's the spot.
With the 7th pick in the first round, the New England Patriots select Terry Glenn, wide receiver, Ohio State. The Carolina Panthers are next on the clock.